Welcome back to The Download. A lot moved this week, and most of the headlines buried the actual story.
We want to hear from you. Submit questions via the web form in the description or give us a call at 747-234-2678 and leave your question. Don't be shy. Our AI assistant makes it super easy.
Let's start with Amazon. Podcast News Daily reported this week that Boardroom, Kevin Durant and Rich Kleiman's media company, signed a multi-platform pact with Amazon covering distribution and advertising for their shows. On the surface, that's one deal. Strategically, it's something different. Think about how cable operators built leverage in the 1990s. You didn't bundle one channel. You signed enough carriage deals until the pipe became the product. Amazon is running that playbook right now, except the pipe is Prime, Fire TV, Alexa, and Audible all at once. Boardroom gets distribution reach. Amazon gets premium sports and culture content it didn't have to build. Both sides call it a win. But here's what I'd want to know if I were on the other side of that negotiation. What do the exclusivity clauses look like? What does Amazon own if this scales? Radio consolidation in the late 90s looked like a great deal for independent station groups, right until Clear Channel controlled the rate card. The creator side of this agreement needs to read the fine print carefully. Podcast News Daily also reported Amazon is adding a dedicated creator hub to Fire TV, featuring videos and podcasts from digital creators. So this isn't an isolated experiment. They're building the infrastructure first, then populating it with content deals. That sequencing matters. Now let's talk about iHeartMedia. Inside Radio reported Thursday that iHeart launched the iHeart Soccer Podcast Network, more than 20 shows in English and Spanish, timed to build a year-round audience ahead of the World Cup. Vertical sports audio is interesting from a monetization standpoint. Live adjacency drives habitual listening. Habitual listening drives higher CPMs. Soccer specifically has a demographic profile advertisers pay up for: younger, bilingual, hard to reach via terrestrial. So the strategic logic isn't wrong.
But I want to see the unit economics in year one. 20-plus shows is a significant content investment. If soccer listenership remains seasonal outside of World Cup cycles, you're carrying production costs against a CPM base that softens in January and February. iHeart's done this before with other verticals. Some worked. The NFL audio plays generally held up. Niche leagues have been spottier. The World Cup is a one-time catalyst. What keeps the audience subscribing to the habit in 2027? The Libsyn deal for sibling rivalry is worth a quick read, too. The Hollywood Reporter noted that Bob the Drag Queen in Monet Exchange's show is now exclusively hosted and monetized through Libsyn. What mid-tier distributors are offering proven talent is ownership clarity, structures the major networks generally won't touch. If you're assembling a content portfolio right now, that gap is a real acquisition risk. Shows you think you have relationships with are quietly moving towards structures that prioritize creator control. Follow the money on all three of these. Amazon is paying for distribution leverage. iHeart is paying for habit formation. Libsyn is paying in structural flexibility for proven talent. Every one of these is a bet on a different theory of where audio value accrues. And that question, where does audio value actually accrue, gets a lot more specific when you look at the ad tech infrastructure being built underneath all of it. What does it look like when programmatic finally catches up to what podcasting's reach data says it should be worth?
So the deals set the stage. Now follow the money into ad tech. Podscribe dropped their latest benchmark report this week, and there's a number in there that should be sitting on every direct response advertiser's desk. Visitor retargeting campaigns delivered 7.4 times higher visitor rates than standard podcast ad placements. Not incremental, 7.4 times. Think about what that means structurally. Radio never got here. Terrestrial never built the attribution layer to prove retargeting worked at that multiple. Podcast infrastructure just did. And if you're still pitching DR advertisers on host reads alone, you're leaving a quantifiable performance gap on the table. Now, Podscribe's report also flagged audience buys gaining real traction alongside retargeting. This isn't theoretical anymore. The programmatic machinery is maturing fast, and the networks that built direct sales teams optimized for brand dollars are going to feel this before they're ready for it. Now, Spotify. Digiday had a piece this week on how Spotify is rebuilding its entire ad business around automation and AI, not tweaking, rebuilding. The target is the agency budget pool that currently lives at Google and Meta. Which sounds ambitious until you realize Spotify has something Google and Meta can't easily replicate in audio: first-party listener data at scale tied to a streaming behavior graph. If their automation stack actually works, they don't need to win on CPM. They just need to be easier to buy than every alternative. And here's the consequence nobody's running through. If Spotify captures agency automation budgets, margin compresses for every other network selling host-read inventory, because the pitch to the agency becomes, why negotiate a host-read deal with a mid-tier network when I can programmatically target the same listener profile across Spotify's inventory and get a performance report in 48 hours? That's not a question about Spotify's success. That's a question about your sales team's positioning right now. If you're not gaming this out with your direct sales force before upfront season, your competitors already are.
Third number worth putting in front of your board. Sounds Profitable unveiled research at VidCon. 73% of podcast listeners say they'd follow a creator across formats: audio, video, newsletter, clips, whatever the creator builds next. Your talent retention argument just got more expensive because that number doesn't live in a listener survey. It lives in your creator's agent's pitch deck when contract renewal comes around. Creator portability is a monetization risk dressed up as an audience stat, and the networks that haven't stress-tested their talent agreements against it are going to find out the hard way. The Podscribe retargeting data, the Spotify automation play, the creator portability number. 3 different signals, same underlying pressure. The audience relationship is becoming more measurable, more automatable, and more portable. The networks that built their moats on exclusive relationships and handshake deals are watching those moats narrow. In that question, where audiences actually come from now and how you find them before a competitor does, that's exactly where discovery data gets interesting. We'll get into that next.
So where are listeners actually coming from now? Because the App Store optimization playbook is losing its edge fast. Research published this week by Podcast News Daily found that YouTube is now podcasting's front door. 40% of listeners discovered a favorite show there. YouTube and social media combined account for 61% of all favorite show discovery. That's not a marginal shift, that's a structural one. And when you layer in Featured's new AI discovery tool, backed by a database of 814,000 active shows, according to Business Insider, you start to see the shape of the new problem. The inventory of shows is enormous. The old discoverability stack wasn't built for that scale. If search within podcast apps isn't where listeners are finding content, then the entire SEO for podcast playbook that networks have been running for 5 years needs a hard look. The unit economics question I'd ask any network exec is what percentage of your new listener acquisition is coming from owned and operated channels versus third-party social? If you don't know that number off the top of your head, you don't actually know your audience acquisition cost. Now, flip that forward. Discovery is fragmenting. Attention surfaces are multiplying, which means the shows that can localize, that can show up natively in markets where the distribution infrastructure is still being built, have a real first-mover window. That's what makes Otonal's move interesting. They launched a localization service this week, specifically adapting English-language podcasts and ads for Japan. Culturally tailored scripts, native voice casting. Business Wire covered it. It sounds niche, it isn't. Japan is one of the largest digital ad markets in the world, and audio advertising there is underdeveloped relative to the population's media consumption habits. If ad-supported audio scales in Japan over the next 3 to 5 years, the networks that built catalog presence early are going to look very smart. The ones that waited will be licensing rights at a premium. And yes, there will be a moment where someone at a major network says they should have moved sooner. That moment is coming.
So we've got discovery fragmenting, international bets being placed. It's an optimistic growth story, mostly. But there's another side to this growth picture that nobody's pricing in yet.
And it involves a very public implosion in Australia that every legal and standards team in this industry should be reading right now. One cold pivot before we close the books today. That's the episode. A lot moved this week. Amazon's carriage play with Boardroom, Spotify's automation push compressing host-read margins, and the Stefanovic situation reminding every network exec that informal podcast editorial norms are a liability waiting to be discovered in a contract review. The through line, the infrastructure decisions being made right now, distribution, attribution, ad tech, are where the value pools or evaporates. That's not speculative. The data is showing it. If this landed, forward it to a colleague who needs the context. Tips and feedback find us at the download at hey-mado.com. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, and if you've got 30 seconds, leave a review. It moves the needle more than most people realize. Thanks for being here. We'll be back with more Signal next time.